Episode 65 of the Interpretation Station is called to order. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this special episode for my Jedi speaking viewers. We've got an episode for today. Well, I've been neglecting you a bit recently. I've been experimenting with all kinds of weird things, doing tutorials from Arabic and all this kind of nonsense. So I thought, yes, I needed to do a Jedi episode in, obviously, the Wham Bam Thank You Roland format. And as it's something a bit different I have lined up with you. Now the problem is, I have to admit, it's finding the statements is actually the problem. What I've been looking for is a statements together with a video or audio of the actual statement being delivered in any of the Jedi dialects, be it in Serbia, in Croatia, Montenegro, wherever. Because what I was looking for were statements where I could find the audio or video of the statement together with the actual transcript. But it's very difficult to find. But so to be honest, today's episode it's going to be Ivica Dačić again. The Speaker of the Serbian National Assembly. And I realised that Ivica Dačić, that was the subject of my last Jedi episode. And it's not for any particular love of Ivica Dačić. It's just that on his page, you go to it on Skupština Republike Srbije, and you go to govori predsjednika Skupštine, and there you open up the page. You have, in the same page, you have the transcript, and at the bottom you have the actual video. It's so simple. And so that's why I'm doing it again. It's just to save me having to look around all over the internet trying to match transcripts with videos. And what I've done today, as I said, this is a bit different what I've done. So I have actually recorded myself, oh yes, I did it this morning, interpreting Dačić's statement. And so I am going to do something of a self-assessment. I'm going to take you through what I personally did, and I'm going to say what I did well, what I didn't do so well, and should be interesting. Now the statement was from the 15th of December, 2020. Dačić na konferenciji Svet u 2021. godini. Srbija je spremno dočekala krizu izazvanu pandemijom COVID-19. Okay, so he's addressing the National Assembly. I think at this point he's just assumed the office of Speaker. Remember, that's what we call predsjednik Skupštine. We've got the Speaker. And so, yeah, it's a statement. It's a lot to do with COVID. And so the way we're going to do it is... I'm going to disappear from your screens as I am, and you're going to watch me trying to do this statement from this morning. That's the video you'll see, and then on the bigger screen I'm going to have the text of the statement. Now I want to point out I did this the first time. This was it was pretty much unprepared. Okay. It's a tough speech, I'll tell you that. So, I recommend you do it afterwards or try before, whatever you want to do. It's tough. He speaks pretty fast. He's a pretty good speaker generally. He can be a very good speaker, but he really rattles through this statement quickly. So I did struggle on a couple of occasions. Anyway, you'll see, and you decide. But I think I used some good solutions, and it's I think it's a good text to show some what we call coping mechanisms, how to cope when the speaker is speaking really fast. So let's get started. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the government, ladies and gentlemen. So you see how he throws in članovi I članice vlade. So I thought, okay, it's still early doors. I'll try and reflect that sort of gender based nuance. So to do that, I said, I added another ladies and gentlemen after he said members of the government. Had that been later on in the statement, when I was under pressure, I'd have just left that out. But I sort of figured, okay, we're at the start. I've still got loads of energy, and I can reflect that little nuance, as I say. Excellencies, participants at this conference, I wish you a warm welcome to the National Assembly, which this year too is the host of this important conference, where I hope will give at least some responses to the many questions raised this year in the economic, political, cultural life of Serbia, Europe and the world. Okay, so a fairly straightforward opening, if rather fast. Already at this point, I'm thinking, here we go. Strap yourself in, get ready. So Narodna Skupština, so the set terminology appears to be National Assembly, which terminology I go with in this statement. And the rest, so odgovore na brojna pitanja koja su ove godine otvorena, sometimes otvoriti pitanja, I said questions that were raised. I mean, I could have perhaps gone literally questions that were opened, but I thought that sounded a slightly odd in English, so typical collocation with questions, to raise questions. It's a unique year in our history for all of us, with challenges posed not just for our country, but for the whole of modern civilization. At this point, I'm now wondering, was this such a good idea, as you may tell by the slight I give and the slightly flustered look on my face. But anyway, so you'll notice what I did here. I heard this run of words, iza nas je po mnogo čemu jedinstvena. I sort of swallowed a lot of that and just went with the two main points, words of, the three main words in that clause, jedinstvena godina u novoj istoriji. I just said it's been a unique year in our history. This iza nas je po mnogo čemu, that can, under these sort of circumstances, you don't have to reflect that really word for word. It's important just to get I think the importance in this clause is that the uniqueness of the year, and then the challenges that we're facing. Again, because he's going fast, you need to have your sort of typical go-to collocation with Izazov, with challenge. So to face challenges, facing our challenge, facing our country, and modern civilization. And I think I just lost suočile u ovoj generaciji. That sort of passed me by. It's a tough, fast opening. Coronavirus has changed the world that we knew just a year ago. In that change, we are participating, all of us. How things will look next year and future years depends on the decisions that we take now. That's why at this conference I see it as a chance to try and shape the future. Okay, so I'll just stop it here. Okay, so I zato na ovu našu konferenciju. Here I would usually say, I didn't take my own advice here. I'll often talk about nominalizing the first noun of that you come across in a sentence, which in this case would be našu konferenciju. And in other words, I would advise you to sort of say that's why our conference. I would make it a nominative. It's accusative, but it tends to make things easier to put it into the nominative. And following the advice I would usually give, I would have said usually, this conference of ours, I see it as an important chance to try and shape a better future, or whatever. Whereas I think I said here, at this conference, so I follow it, the syntax really, na ovu našu konferenciju, at this conference, and then I sort of try and sort of backtrack a little. I see it as an important chance, but it's just a small point I just wanted to note for you that, again, it tends to make things easier if you try and nominalize that first noun that you run into. So we know, so we recognize what's happened in the past year and see how we reacted to those challenges. Just okay, so he almost threw me with this word postavili at the end here. The only reason he threw me was, again, I hear Izazov, and I'm expecting to hear something like kako smo odreagovali or kako smo odgovorili na izazove, and he says postavili. But anyway, I just said, I think to react or how we responded to these challenges. So sometimes, you just need to rely on your sort of reaction rather than overthink the verb. Like, I mean, if you were to overthink it, it would for prema tim izazovima postavili, how we set ourselves up in the face of those challenges, and that would just take up far too much time. It's overcomplicated. Sometimes you just have to trust your reactions. Okay, just trust those collocations that you know. Under a year ago, February, I was foreign minister of Serbia. I think I missed here boravio sam u svojstvu, okay? Which would usually be, obviously, I visited. I didn't quite catch the verb. And, okay, so what I do, I simplified it, but I just said, I remember that he was, I remember he used to be the foreign minister. So I just said, okay, I was Serbian foreign minister. And then I'm hoping at this point that the rest of the sentence, I'll be able to fit the whatever he wants to say around that. And then sure enough, he says, or I say, I made an official visit to China. I spoke to senior officials there, even though China... So I broke that sentence from pre nešto down to sa njenim najvišim zvaničnicima. I broke that up into about 2 smaller sentences. I said, well, even 3. So I was Serbian foreign minister. I was on an official visit to China. I spoke with their senior officials. That's a trick, that can be very helpful with the longer sentences that are going fast, to just break it up into more manageable little chunks. And so I did that quite successfully there, I think. Back then had already been hit by COVID. And there were strict quarantine measures in place. No one could imagine how fast, how intensely that virus would spread around the world and what its consequences would be. So again, he's going fast, and I'm again trying to break it up. I'm trying to get away. Sometimes you have to get away from the original syntax under these conditions. U njoj su vladale oštre mere karantina. So again, if you were too wed to the original, you'd be like thinking, there were strict quarantine measures prevailing there. That doesn't, in English, that doesn't sound very good. Or even were, if you have to say there was the prevalence of strict quarantine measures, which word for word is sort of what he says. But again, you need to sometimes just think what you would say in English. Let your sort of reactions just take over. And I said here that there were strict quarantine measures in place. And again, da proceni kojom brzinom I intenzitetom. Again, I was quite happy here that I got away from the original proceni, which normally I might say, to assess or to analyze. And I went with to imagine. No one could imagine how fast the virus would spread. The fact that back then you could travel around the world still for important state business. Okay, so I turn this into važnih državnih poseta. So okay, I turn this, the first word that came to mind, traveling about on business, that just came to, travel on important state business. I mean, again, I could have said travel on state visits. Somehow, though, in English, for me as an English native speaker, it seemed slightly more natural to say, to travel on state business. So either or would have been fine. Reflects the fact that just 9 months ago, we believed that our everyday life wouldn't change that much. So you can tell I'm getting nervous here. I'm twiddling my eyebrows. Classic sign that I'm under pressure. Uveren, you confident you could have said in the belief that. Again, here, nasza svakodnevnica. Again, you got to let the reactions take over. Just our everyday lives wouldn't change that much. We cannot choose when a crisis emerges, but what we can do, what we must do, is be ready for it. Okay, so here I perhaps with kada će kriza da nastupi. So here I don't react. I'm trying to actually here reflect exactly the sort of word that he uses, nastupi. He said when a crisis emerges. More natural in English, you would probably say we can't choose when the crisis is going to hit. Hit is sort of the classic collocation that we have in English. I was perhaps at this point trying to be a bit fancy. Perhaps I was quite pleased with how I'd done the previous paragraph. I was on a bit of a roll and I was trying to show off a bit, but it would have been better to say it when the crisis hit. Serbia was ready for the crisis in every way. This word often can cause problems. So again, I'm quite pleased with what I did here. Dočekala krizu. Again, there might be this temptation to try and render dočekati, to say something along the lines of that Serbia was readily awaiting the crisis, which it doesn't, though, sound very good in English. And again, this is a sort of classic case of where you just have to think, what do you say more natural in English? And so you just don't. So I just got rid of the verb. I just said Serbia was ready for the crisis. And it reminds me, that's one of those things that people from Jedi land, they always ask me, okay, how do you say in English, like, gde ćeš dočekati Novu godinu? And that was one of those things that really annoyed me when people asked it, because again, the answer is a bit satisfactory in English. You basically, you say, where are you going to spend New Year? Or where I'm from Edinburgh, in Scotland. So we would say, where are you going to see in the bells? Because there's always bells ringing for New Year, and so that's a classic thing you ask. Well, where are you going to see in the bells? Or where are you going to see in the new year? So that dočekati is a bit of a nuisance word generally. When it comes to the readiness of our health system to protect the public health in the economies, I was quite pleased here, očuva narodno zdravlje, that the word protect came to me. I remembered that initially I was looking at maintain or preserve, but I think protect. I think I was the right choice. Social welfare, maintaining standard of living, but also in terms of all normal political democratic processes. Očuvanje životnog standarda, here you'll note I went for standard of living. You could also say the quality of life. I think those two terms are pretty much interchangeable. Not exactly the same, but 90% of the time interchangeable. Because economic stability and growth has been achieved in the recent period, and so Serbia, during the crisis, was able to protect jobs. And again, he uses očuva radna mesta. So again, I was quite pleased that I got the protect. But it even managed to attract investment and develop strategic infrastructure projects. So yeah, I'm under pressure here. I'm clapping my hands, sort of semi-clapping my hands here, because he's really going at quite a rate. I think this fell by the wayside. Nesmetane privredne tokove. I think I just dropped that. I think if I was to do it now, looking at it just on site, Serbia in the midst of the crisis managed not only to protect jobs and unimpeded trade flows, commercial, economic flows, and then this bit I think I'm talking about attracting investment and developing infrastructure projects. This would not have been possible without the urgent harnessing of the whole system, including from the president, the local government, and the assembly. So I'm really getting under pressure here. as you can see on the screen. And again, so just the choice of words is a bit disconcerting. This whole little clause here, vanrednog angažovanje celog našeg sistema. Actually, I'm quite pleased with what the solution I gave here, the urgent harnessing of our whole system. I think that was a pretty good solution I gave there. But I think that just getting that word harnessing made me lose a bit of steam, and then he starts listing then all the various institutions that sort of chipped in. You know, the president, the government, the parliament, local governments, and I think I missed a couple of those. But I mean, as I say, angažovanje in this context, I think harness was a good choice of was a good solution. And it would have been impossible without the solidarity of our citizens, above all, who during the crisis committed to each other, and the vast majority of them supported the measures introduced. Okay, and then this is again this whole sentence here is rattled off very quickly. And again, I'm having to just decide that some of these, I simply take a decision. I can't get every word in here. I think I drop odgovornosti. So I managed to get the solidarity of our citizens at least. I get 1 out of 2. Koji su se u vreme krize posvetili jedni drugima, who committed to each other, as I use. Perhaps with the benefit of hindsight, if I had all that time to prepare, who stood shoulder to shoulder with each other, would really reflect the idea of what he's trying to say. What I said, I mean, they committed to each other. It's okay. It sounds all right. More or less gets the meaning across. Sometimes that's the minimum you have to do. And then again, I think I miss, they stood behind the measures and recommendations. I think I miss koje su dolazile od države. I think that I just decided, okay, I'm just going to drop that were proposed or whatever, and I've got to just be ready for the next sentence. Kako god da se stvari budu razvijale. Again, sometimes you just have to make these sacrifices. You have to say to yourself, okay, I'm not going to, if I risk trying to get the end of this sentence, I might miss the start of the next one, and then you get into trouble. Regardless how things develop ahead, and I'm convinced that we're headed, I hope, towards the end of the crisis, I'm sure that right now we can summarize the fact that Serbia and its citizens have overcome the greatest crisis of their times. So you can tell by the my frenzied hand movements, yes, with kazalasku I gašenju krize. For one moment, I did think about trying to exactly reflect those 2 words. When I heard that zalazak, I was immediately thinking about the sun. What does the sun do? It's setting. But again, the setting of the crisis, the gašenje krize, switching off of the crisis. Sometimes, again, you just got to go with what sounds most natural in English. And another tip here, for example, if the idea was to come to you, I think in English, one of the things we often talk about, is light at the end of the tunnel. I think if that was to occur to you in the moment, and you said, and I'm convinced that there's light at the end of the tunnel, you can sort of go with it, even though it's not an exact rendering of the original source language. It's very much the meaning of that sort of expression is very representative of the original. I think it would be reasonable to go with something like that, if it occurred to you in the moment. And I was quite pleased, njeni građani izborili sa najvećom krizom. So I said they've overcome the greatest crisis. I also like to weather crises. That's a good expression in English, to weather a crisis. Didn't occur to me at the time, but now looking back, that would have sounded nice. In a way that will set them in good store and will be the pride of future generations. Now here I get slightly mixed up with my idioms. I was trying to, I was trying to say that will set them in good stead. You know, when you go through a tough experience and you get through it, sets you in good stead. And I got confused with setting when you're talking about set great store by something when you attach a lot of importance to something. So what I should have said was, "We'll set them in good stead." Now, the emergency did shake us at one point, but they didn't undermine our political democratic life. The best evidence of here's a sort of good example. I just missed out. I missed out. Kauštova mnie poznato. I just thought it was too many words to render. He was already slipping away from me, so I just went straight into the urgent circumstances. Shook us at one point. Looking back, by the way, vanredne okolnosti, and how we would best reflect that in English. And I think the emergency could be a quick way of doing it. The exceptional circumstances, either of those could work. This is that we're able to hold and conduct regular parliamentary local elections on democratic standards. Here, po punim demokratskim standardima. I said just on democratic standards, which obviously isn't quite the right preposition that you'd be using in this context. You know, you'd want to say it really in keeping with, in line with, as per, you know, one of those. But again, it was just a question of speed. He was going so fast, like it just didn't come to me just at that moment. Serbia is one of the first European countries who, despite the crisis and the emergency, managed to conduct elections. Okay, so here again, vanrednim okolnostima. So here I did say the emergency. I'm quite pleased. I think the first time I said the emergency circumstances or something, but I think that's just saying the emergency was a good, quick solution to quite a tricky little phrase, vanredne okolnosti. As it is, it just trips off the tongue much easier than the exceptional circumstances. And this was done in our footsteps by a number of European states and in the US. I'm quite pleased with what I did here with Uzneka nasza iskustva. So the idea was that, you know, the other European countries, I guess, maybe followed the Serbian model. So I was quite pleased to get in that a bit about the footsteps. Maybe you can talk about a number of other European states emulated us. That's another good alternative. Now, the constitution of the assembly first, and then the government, and the adoption of important decisions meant that we didn't allow external circumstances undermine the political life of our country. Just a quick word here on donoszeniem drugich ważnych odluka. I was pleased again. I got the adoption of other important measures. You could obviously you could say the enactment of important decisions. And I think so. I turn this. This is actually an example of nominalizing, because you'll know I said the constitution of the government, and then of the assembly, and then the government, and the adoption of important decisions. So I made all of that nominative. Obviously, in the original, it's in the instrumental, which if you were to do it, keeping it in the instrumental would have been by constituting the assembly and then the government, and by enacting important decisions. We didn't allow the nismo dopusti. We didn't allow, you know, these exceptional circumstances, which would have worked fine as well. But so, as I said, I nominalized it, and then okay, when you nominalize, sometimes you just have to think on your feet a bit and adapt the rest of the sentence. I threw in, you know, the enactment of the adoption of important decisions meant that, and then dopustili, that we didn't let these extreme social circumstances. So yeah, sometimes you can leave it. Sometimes you can go with the original by keeping it in the instrumental. As I say, I prefer to nominalize, and I find it just gives me a bit more flexibility further on down the sentence. But yeah, you do have to adapt sometimes. Remind you that a few days ago here in Assembly, on a regular basis, we adopted the budget for the next year, which is further proof of stability and vitality of our whole system in the midst of crisis. And I finish off quite well. He actually adds a couple more minutes after that if you watch the original, which he sort of acts in a sort of impromptu basis, but that is the real meat of the statement. So it was an interesting experiment. I might do more of those. I just need to find a suitable page where I can find audio and transcript. And I thought it was a useful experiment for you, the viewers, to see how I handle something under these circumstances. And yeah, as you can see, I did feel under a certain degree of pressure. That was a tough statement to do. But anyway, I do hope that you've learned a couple of useful tricks, maybe learned a couple of useful new words. If you like this format, I can do this again, as I say. If you have liked it, please do click the thumbs up button. Please do subscribe if you haven't done so already. Keep following me on the LinkedIn group. And if the viewers, have any good suggestions of statements to do from Jedi into English, please do contact me. Send me a link and send me the audio. I just need, it's good. I need to have the two, the audio and the transcript. It makes it easiest. So yeah, if you there's some statement, any statement that you would like me to do for you, please do send me in. Okay, so with that, I'm going to say goodbye now. I'm going to wish you all a good weekend, and I hope to see you soon. So, episode 65 of the Interpretation Station stands adjourned.
The train is now leaving the Interpretation Station. We hope you enjoyed your visit. Until next time, folks.